I'd like to take a moment to share with you an interesting conversation that I had with a new client. It's my hope that what she has allowed me to share is a help to you the way it was to her. She is 38 years old. She is in a 2-year situationship. She came to me and said, "Doc, I'm coming to you because I am in what I believe is now a situationship, though I haven't always seen it that way. And I'm hoping you can maybe give me some clarity about what I'm doing and perhaps what I should do next." I said, "First of all, why are you calling this a situationship? What's the situation?" She said, "Well, I've been seeing this gentleman for 2 years and he is separated from his wife." I said, "Okay." I said, "How did you meet him?" She said, "Well, I met him at a friend's get together and he introduced himself and we started talking. Later that evening, he shared with me that he was in the process of getting a divorce. Things kind of went for a turn and one thing led to another, not that night, but as the weeks went on and we became intimate and we engaged in much deeper spaces together and just began to see one another." I said, "Man, what were the details of his situationship or his separation?" She said, "Well, they live in the same home. He actually stays in the guest room and she lives in the main bedroom. They've got two small children. He is 39 years old, and he indicated to her that they're simply roommates, that they have no physical intimacy. They are not involved with each other no more than just taking care of the home, making sure that the children get to school and to their activities, and that's it, but that they are in the process of this divorce." I said, "Did you ask him when they were separated?" She said, "I did." She said he indicated that they officially started using the term separation about 6 months prior to the time that my client and this gentleman met. I said, "So in essence, he has been separated for 2.5 years, correct?" She said, "I guess I didn't look at it that way." And I looked at her and I said, "How did you not think of it that way?" She said, "Well, I guess I was just counting my time with him." I said, "Ma'am, your time with him is minimal in the grand scheme of his situation and what you are calling this. You're putting the word ship on something as if you want it to be a relationship, but it's not. And I'm not even quite sure it's a situation." She said, "Doc, how can you say?" I said, "Because situations are complicated. Situations are difficult to understand or figure out. Situations might require deep thought or evaluation or analysis." I said, "Ma'am, he was separated 6 months, so he says, before you all met, correct?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Is his status still separation?" She said, "It is." I said, "Why?" She said, "Well, he claims, things are tied up in the courts and they're trying to work some things out in terms of finances and what's going to happen with the kids and things like that." I said, "That sounds common. That's a part of divorce. Wouldn't you agree?" She said, "I would." I said, "So what makes his situation 2.5 years complicated?" Her eyes got big. They started to get watery. She started to cry. I gave her a moment. I said, "Ma'am, while you're crying, I want you to think about a very important question I'm going to ask you. And if you take offense to the question, that's fine too. But the question that I want you to consider is, what is it so special about you that you believe that he's going to change his situation with you after 2 years of not having to change his situation with you?" She just looked at me. I said, "Do you need the question again?" I said, "What is it about you that you think is so special about you that makes you think he's going to change his situation concerning you?" She said, "Doc, I get what you're getting at, but I do believe that they're not involved. I do believe that they are roommates. I do believe that they're only just about the children. He's shown me screenshots of arguments. He's shown me videos of times where they've had arguments and disagreements. He's shown me all of these things, and I really believe that it's a true, separation and a true situation that's heading to divorce." I said, "Ma'am, even if you're correct, the reality is that man is still married." I said, "So you understand this. So why are you now all of a sudden, after 2.5 years, evaluating this?" She said, "Because we had a big fallout at Christmas time." I said, "What happened?" Well, he claimed, that we could not go out of town to see one another, to engage with one another. I actually wanted to surprise him. His birthday is around the holidays, and so I wanted to surprise him with a trip out of the country and spend 4 or 5 days with him around the holidays, and he told me no. I said, okay. I said, and what was the problem with that answer? She said, well, Doc, the problem was I felt like because he's separated, because they're roommates, he can go and come as he wants. He claims, typically locally, he's able to go and come as he pleases for the most part if he's not working. I figured this would be no different. But he said to me, I can't, it's the holidays. I've got to be with my kids. And his wife is going to be involved with some things that they're going to do together with the kids and things like that. I said, and that made you upset? She said, yeah. I said, ma'am, side pieces don't get holidays. Holidays aren't a part of the side piece package. She started to get upset and I didn't stop. I said, ma'am, number one, I want you to get yourself together. And number two, let's just use an analogy to hopefully make this make sense, because I don't think you understand the difference between a status change and a life change. She said, yes, sir. I said, do you have a phone? She said, I do. I said, grab it. She grabbed her phone. I said, what kind of phone do you have? She said, an iPhone. I said, perfect. I said, unlock the phone. She unlocks it. I said, do you have apps on your phone? She said, I do. I said, have you ever updated any apps on your phone? She said, yeah, all the time. I said, do the apps update automatically or do you have to push them through? She said, my settings, I have to push them through. I said, okay, well, of course, they can be updated automatic if you choose that as a setting, or you can push them through. I said, perfect, though. For the example, your response is perfect. You have to push the through app update through, correct? She said, yeah. I said, when you update the app, does it remove the app? She said, no. I said, what's the purpose of the update then? She looked at me and said, well, it's to make the apps run better. I said, that's interesting. If the purpose of updating the app is to make the app run better, then you would also probably be able to say that the purpose of separation is to maybe make that marriage run what? She said, better. I said, oh. She sat there and she paused almost with a nostalgic look and said, Doc, are you telling me that separation is designed to make marriage better? I said, if separation is done well, separation can become the bridge to bring two people back together. I said, ma'am, it has taken 2.5 years. I said, are they millionaires? She said, no. I said, do they have multiple properties in different states? She said, no. I said, do they have complicated job situations? She said, no. I said, do they have children with disabilities? She said, no. I said, ma'am, this ain't complicated. I said, at the end of the day, the purpose of the app is to make apps run better. Now, do they always run better? She said, no. I said, of course not. We can be fair here. I've updated apps and sometimes wished I never chose the update because the older version worked better. Is that fair? She said, it is. I said, so you can upload or update an app and it runs worse. But the purpose of separation, when it's done well, is to give two people a chance to pause from each other's presence to figure out if they can proceed with the marriage. And typically separations where two people are still in the home, can they work? Sure, anything's possible. But the best separations are going to be those separations where two people are completely out of each other's vicinity, because you get the chance to get a fresh look at your partner to determine if this marriage is going to work. But when people are just roommates in the same space, for whatever reason, money, kids, it doesn't matter. That is an example of an update that might be a poor update. I said, but let me ask you this. Have you ever deleted an app? She said, I have. I said, and when you delete an app, can you use it anymore? She said, you can't. I said, when you delete an app, can you see what's going on with that app anymore? She said, you cannot. I said, ma'am, a separation is a life update. A divorce is a life change. And most people don't understand the difference. I said, ma'am, right now, your situationship, your situation boyfriend is going through a life update. And we don't know if post this life update, if his marriage is going to run better or if it's going to run worse. But what we do know is that he's still what? She said, married. I said, ma'am, side pieces don't get holidays. It's all nice that you all in your feelings because you feel like you should get that time because of what he said to you. I said, but if you would just look at the facts, the last time I checked, I have never seen an app take 2.5 years to what? She said, update. I said, I can't give you the magic amount of time of how long it takes. Different states have different rules on separation. There's so many layers to this, but 2.5 years, I don't know a state that exists that takes 2.5 years of separation, or requires rather 2.5 years of separation. I know many states that require you to be out of different dwelling places. You can't be under the same roof to be classically considered separated. Every state, no, especially here in the United States. But what I also know is that it is inappropriate and just not realistic for you as the side piece to expect holidays because you don't get holidays. And I said, ma'am, that phrase or that term side piece might make you feel some kind of way. But you know, my work is grounded in what? She put her head down and said self-awareness. I said, and what is that? She said, it's honesty about who we are, where we are, and what we're doing. I said, ma'am, you can't even look at the situation right until you start there. The reality is he's going through a life update, not a life change. When he gets that divorce, he is going through a life change. And if y'all want to do this, he's all yours and you can be all his. But until then, he's an app that's still spinning, that's updating. And you can't really use that app until what? She said, until it's finished. She was really thankful. She was really sweet. She really took my feedback and she took it like a champion. And I'm pleased to say she's making incredible progress in looking at this situation, reevaluating her values, and did make the decision to step back and remove herself completely from the situation. I hope this story made sense. If it did, type church in the comments with 3 R's. And then remember, you've got 2 jobs. 1, be better today than what you were yesterday. And 2, don't forget what I told you. What's up, everybody? This is Dr. Zeb. Listen, I've been dying to make this announcement for a very long time now, and I'm pleased to say that Inspire Nation has officially launched. Yes, we finally got a Facebook and YouTube community group where we're going to have exclusive content, exclusive shorts, exclusive discussion prompts, where we're going to engage with other people literally around the world who are on the same healing journey that we're on. I need you to go find these pages right now on Facebook and YouTube. Inspire Nation, follow the page, join the group, introduce yourself, and be prepared to link up with literally thousands of people around the world who are on the same healing journey, who are looking for the same resources, and who want to also be surrounded with other like-minded individuals who are growing in the same direction as you are. I'm so excited about this because it's the beginning of some great things I can't talk about right now. Listen, you got 2 jobs. 1, be better today than what you were yesterday. And 2, don't forget what I told you.